There's problem by becoming rich.
Take all your money, buy Bitcoin.
I say when we
You can
sell.
wake up every morning and say GM.
GM. Thursday, 27th of June. Daily levels. So, BTC is showing some signs of weakness here. I mentioned a few different paths, if I can find the different charts that I was looking at here. That was that one. This is the same one. I was sure I had another one. Could be here. Ah, yeah. Alright, so we've got a few different paths here. So this first path, I don't think there's going to be an imminent breakdown before the OPEX, the options expiry, which is tomorrow. So that's good from the perspective of bulls defending BTC. I do think 58k can be the bottom. And as we sit right now, before the expiry tomorrow, you've got a large wall of open interest at 60, a smaller but significant one at 62, and then obviously 65 above. So it's highly unlikely that Bitcoin's going to go anywhere significant before then. I do think, though, that if you look at this daily chart, and I thought I had more paths. Did I take those off? No. Anyway, I had a bunch of different paths, but the bullish one that I was looking at, which would have been to push higher, that's invalidated so far. Now BTC could, and is sort of, if you take a distribution across from the breakdown to where we're at now, it's right down at the value area low of this consolidation, which for now is okay and can lead Bitcoin to moving back up again. But there's really an absence of any kind of impulse or strength. And when it's just kind of drifting down and then holding at the lows and having weak bounces and holding and filling in more and more volume at these levels, I think it's more likely to actually push lower from here, because it has attempted several times to bounce. And with the Coinbase spot premium taking a nosedive over here, this is over the past month, and we saw going into the start of the week, the premium was this, which is the red line, premium was starting to increase slightly. The market seemed like it might rally off the Monday dump, but yesterday, big spike down on it as, you know, Coinbase selling becomes the dominant theme in the market again. This is, you know, the US government selling some Bitcoin. It's possibly the German government. We know like the reasons for it, but I'm talking just in the near term. I'm talking like, you know, on a day-by-day basis. That opens up a potential for weakness. There's not much flowing into the ETFs. Yesterday, the ETFs, we had no outflows, which is good, but we had another week day of inflows, 31 million, then 21 million. So there's no sustained demand there from the ETFs at the moment, which is, again, that's fine. That's just part of where we're at in the market right now. And I think that BTC, if this was going to be more of a bullish correction, you know, going to hold in this area in order to build up a potential consolidation to go higher, I think if that's going to happen, you need to see it reclaim and push to 62. You want to see it then form a higher low, and you want to see price building towards the top end of this distribution. Right now, it's just compressing and consolidating at the bottom end, which would have me just cautious initially about the prospects of a sell-off. If you look here too, it might just be as simple as Tuesday's lows need to get hit. So Tuesday left sort of a flat bottom. We pumped right off the daily open. Wednesday, we took out the highs, reversed. So it might just be Bitcoin is going to flush down, take some stops down to there, and then come back up again. So if you look at that here, it could be just as simple as that. maybe Bitcoin is just going to dip down a bit lower and then reclaim and put in sort of a higher low before either a continuation or some kind of building up of strength. I don't know, it depends. It depends a lot on how much actual selling there's going to be from, these government entities. And like I said, Bitcoin can absorb this no problem. This is no problem to Bitcoin whatsoever in the long term. Bitcoin's a $1.3 trillion asset, $1.2 trillion asset. To have 10 billion of supply, the market can absorb that easily. But in the short term, it can affect price. And, would it take much for us to go back to the Monday lows? Well, we were there just 3 days ago. Price has a memory, and it wouldn't be hard for price to go back there and retest. So, a lot of people, myself included, were expecting maybe a bit more of a bounce, but that's all we got. And I look at that and think, yeah, that's fine. We got close to that old value area. We pushed up into the breakdown level, breakdown order block. We actually pushed into this downtrend line, right, and retested that. And then again, so failed to break it there, failed there. And this is just where Bitcoin's going now. Is it going to go straight down? I don't think so. But I don't see any strength coming in. And with the lack of spot demand, and in fact some spot weakness on Coinbase, it gives me just a bit of a pause for, a little bit more weakness is showing, and potentially we go a bit lower before reclaiming. Now, that's the full distribution from all of this. I want to take this off and look at something else. Take that, take this, hide these. And I don't need the bands here. I want to look at just this part where we've been consolidating. You can see, so since price reclaimed back above this kind of 60k breakdown level, so there was a hourly level. So that's an hourly market structure level. The last high before the final flush, we reclaimed back above it. We haven't retested that. It's an area to watch as well if we go a bit lower. But since we reclaimed that and pushed up into this range that we're in now, which goes from here all the way across to where we're at, the majority of the volume has been distributed lower. Price is struggling and seems heavy, right? The distribution, the volume is above us, indicating that anyone buying in here is obviously underwater, and the longs are losing currently in this battle. And it might just be a case that we're in a mean reverting market. So mean reverting market meaning that we left a gap on the way down. You see here, there was a gap from here to here. So on the way down, price gapped through that area, and then we filled it. So that's what price did over here. You see there, fill the gap. That's what you class as an efficient move. But on the way back up, we have some gaps left from before. So there's one, okay, from the top of this block. So you can see here to the low of that end. All gaps represent is an area where price is traded through and hasn't retested. And the tendency in a market, if it's not trending, the tendency of a market is to come back and retest levels where inefficiencies were left behind. So maybe that's all the price is going to do. Maybe we're just going to go down and we're going to fill that in, retest, and then start to move in the other direction. But I mentioned the other day how BTC, strength from here, I'll leave that on, but Bitcoin strength, you don't want to see it come back to the lows too soon, because that then indicates that it's trading at these levels, right? So what does that mean? Well, if you look at the price action we've had above 60, you want to understand, how is the market regarding 60k? Does the market see 60k as a place to buy or not? So when we first touched it in March, big wick, clearly lots of demand waiting to buy 60. Then we came back down, couldn't even reach 60. It got front ran, came back down into 60, just wicks, support. Came back then a couple of weeks later. We had one candle close, two candle closes, so two dailies closed below 60, and immediately reclaimed and back for a retest, which held above 60. And then now we're coming back down into it, and this is probably the weakest it has looked in this area. So if it starts to trade down below and we see another daily close below 60, it's a really clear sign from the market that this level, which previously had a lot of support and previously was a demand zone, might be changing actually into a supply zone, and the price is probably angling towards some of the liquidity lower. So we'll see how that goes. There's a lot of good and bad news. You look around, there's government selling, which is bad. You look around, there's a presidential debate tonight, which is probably going to be good. There's probably going to be positive mentions of crypto. But when you're in these phases where there's, equally good and bad reasons or good and bad events or whatever, just stick to price. Just listen to price. So a lot of people will talk about this 60 as if it's holding right now and as if that's a good thing, but price stopping at a level on the way doesn't equal broad strength, right? So the fact that Bitcoin has slowed down after touching this demand zone, it doesn't mean that this is a bullish hold. It can hold this for, weeks and still end up going lower. So the problem with that is, like the 20k level, right? Came down into it, back into it, held, and it takes months and months and months, and then it flushes lower. And even in, bullish markets, the same thing happens, where price comes back to an area where it should stop, and as it stops, people start to call bottoms and get themselves really long again without really any price confirmation. Now, the best price confirmation you're going to get is probably Bitcoin flipping that 50 EMA again on the daily, which we're clearly very far away from doing. So that's not going to give you a short-term signal. That's not going to give you a chance to get long near the lows. So what else would you be looking at? Well, you'd look at the next one, the daily bands, which are faster moving. We're still significantly below those. And really, there's not much else that would point towards Bitcoin having a bullish trend. If we go to the 50, 100, 200, and we go on to the 4 hour, which is one of those trend indicators, again, we're in a full downtrend here. The bands have fully crossed bearish, so the 50 is below the 100, below the 200 since about a week ago. And, they're all fanned out in bearish formation. So there's nothing here to indicate that BTC is a major urgent buy, right? You certainly don't need to be rushing to buy. There's no rush at all. Zero. Because we can move up. You can have a strong, sharp rally, might step down, sharp rally. But that rally like this, Bitcoin could rally all the way to 65 and just be going into the 4 hour bands, bearish, and not flipping anything bullish. And everyone will get long again here and it'll just drift back down. Which, by the way, I think is possible. And I think that after OPEX, so options expiry, after options expiry tomorrow, depending on where Bitcoin's at, we might see a sharp squeeze as, some of the pinning effect gets removed. And you might see shorts getting blown out. I certainly see lots of weak levels up here that can be targeted. There's gaps from the breakdown. There's a couple of weak highs here. There's a flat top up here at 64. So Bitcoin can push to 65, but be mindful that even there, nothing changes. And to be clear about that, you can see this over and over again. When Bitcoin pushed up into the bands over here, the first time it tested them, it went lower. Even here, strong rally into the bands, was not able to flip them, went right back below them, and then eventually got through them. And this happens over and over again because it takes a while for a level to develop. So the 4 hour trend got lost back here in January, rallied up into them, and this time it stayed above and did all its consolidation for over a week above the bands. That's one of the best things you can see, obviously. How can you be in a 4 hour uptrend? So how can you be in a Bitcoin uptrend without being above the bands? You need to be above them. But when price goes below them, especially when it gets significantly below them, be mindful of the first push into them, just like the grayscale news back in August of last year. Pushed up into the bands, but the bands are bearish. 50 should be above the 100 and the 200 if you're bullish. So it was too soon, reversed all the way back, And then slowly it started to build its way through and flipping them from bearish to bullish, and then away we go. And it's a process that generally takes time. Same here. We're in a 4-hour downtrend, 50, 100, 200 in the opposite direction. So 200 is over the 100, over the 50, rallies up above them, too soon, comes all the way back down. Eventually comes up and consolidates in them and consolidates above the bands and holds and holds and holds. You can see the bands squeezing together and then it pushes up. So this is very common, happens all the time. You see it after FTX. Bands are bearish, people get too short, squeezes up above them, it's just too soon, comes back down, retest, and eventually goes. So where are we at right now? Well, we've got bearish bands. We have potential for a rally or a squeeze for sure at some point, in the next couple of weeks. I don't think with the strength of this capitulation and the length of this wick, I don't think Bitcoin breaks down straight away. I do think if it dips down into here, it probably holds 60 or around that level. So I would expect to see, it probably holding like that and then producing some kind of a move up and then back to the lows. And if it's going to hold the pivot, probably around there, right? I wouldn't certainly be shorting down into this if it starts to look like it's breaking down today. And I would be mindful though that if it's not going to have the bullish move, right? If it's not going to go, let's say path one could be this, where it dips down, traps people, and then it pushes up, and then we go back down for a retest later on, and maybe that holds, right? That's like path one. But if it is going to be just weak, which currently, right, price is weak, we lose the level, retests. If it's going to be weak, it's going to come down like this, it's going to come up like that, and it's going to like I showed yesterday, the kind of bouncing ball with lower and lower and lower bounces, and then it's going to roll over. This might just be a genuinely bearish market because there's a lot of selling and not enough real aggressive demand to meet it. So don't get trapped or fooled too much by Ethereum, because Ethereum's obviously relatively a bit stronger, but I don't like Ethereum here at all. And I don't think Ethereum is enough to pull the market out of a bearish phase, because that probably is something that will come later, right? And it doesn't need to be right now. And the talk is that Ethereum ETFs will get their final approval, this week or early next week, and they'll start trading sometime around the 4th of July or after the 4th of July holiday. And that's all well and good, but that doesn't mean that there's going to be inflows. Yeah, like the inflows won't start until it actually trades live. And then we need to see how much demand is there for Ethereum, right? There's no guarantee of demand for Ethereum. BTC obviously has we know the levels of demand for Bitcoin. We know that when the market gets bullish again, Ethereum will probably have demand. But it's not something that is, certainty at this point. I would say far from it. And I see ETH itself as probably, being a little bit away from having, I just think it has to go lower. I think it probably dips down. It probably rallies up. I think that pivot is an area to watch. And I think it comes back again and it chops around. And if it's able to hold, when you get back above that pivot, I think that's when Ethereum becomes all systems go. But I don't really see this yet as being a convincing bottom. Remember, consider the fact that since the ETF rally, it's just been down only, right? So since the ETF rally, 2 days later, distributes, goes down. We haven't broken even the downtrend line yet on Ethereum. And usually you first have a fake out of that, which then leads to a retest. And I would say probably if Bitcoin dips towards 60 today, maybe Ethereum dips down, takes out some stops, rallies up. I think that pivot is key. It's been key on Ethereum. And then we come back probably right into that area where the impulse actually began from, and maybe get a retest in that level before it eventually goes higher. And this is also this is a super bullish chart I'm drawing. It might not even be this bullish. This is a chart considering that Ethereum makes no new lows, that it holds up. And if Bitcoin's going to make new lows, which it might, how long is Ethereum going to continue to hold stronger than BTC? Like I think we're still pretty early in this cycle. And so, like, considering that Ethereum, I get that there's the ETF and all that, but considering that Ethereum in these two structures is holding up better, right? Because it's far further away from its April lows. Ethereum's well above its April lows. Bitcoin is right at them. April, May, that level. Bitcoin's not far at all from it. Ethereum's much further from it. Understand that when the ETF trade is done, Ethereum has a lot more short-term speculative capital to roll off. I think people are getting trapped right now thinking Ethereum's stronger. Ethereum's only stronger because there's less of an incentive to sell. ETF's coming. It could be bullish, so I'm going to stay long ETH. But once the ETF comes, they're going to close those positions. And does that then make Ethereum vulnerable to further weakness than Bitcoin? I think so. I don't think the ETFs are going to be a surprise bullish on day one, because we can clearly see how much demand there is for Bitcoin. And right now it's low. It was really high at the start. But Bitcoin had its, 12 weeks of billions of inflows. And I think also, which I'll talk more about closer to the actual ETF go live date, but the first wave of Wall Street wanting ETFs is done. I think people are maybe not considering the fact that Bitcoin has been hammered down the throat of Wall Street since January, and they've loved it, and boomers have bought it, and it's in their portfolios, and the short-term, hedge funds are buying it and all that. So if there's 15 billion or whatever inflows into Bitcoin ETFs, where's the initial demand going to come for Ethereum? Are they going to sell their Bitcoin to buy Ethereum? Doesn't make sense, because Ethereum has underperformed Bitcoin for 8 years. I don't want this to sound super bearish on Ethereum, because I think Ethereum will do really well. I just think that in the near term, it might be a difficult sell, because what people forget is it was 7 years ago that Ethereum had its all-time high against Bitcoin. Right? So you're actually looking at something that has underperformed Bitcoin for 7 years. And we understand the difference of Ethereum and Bitcoin, but the people that are trying to sell these ETFs and the boomers that are buying them, they don't. They'll say, well, why would I buy Ethereum when it's underperformed Bitcoin for 7 years? That sounds a bit crazy. I'm always told to buy the strength, right? Buy the stock market, buy the S&P, buy the NASDAQ. Don't buy the whatever, the fucking Chinese stock market. And I think it'll be a hard sell initially. And I think the most bullish thing for ETH flows would actually be Bitcoin flows. Because if Bitcoin flows are good and Bitcoin's price is trending higher, then people want more of the next one. Same way that when the stock market rallies broadly, people get a bit more confident to move away from not just Nvidia and Apple and all that. They'll be like, okay, let me give me some of the lower cap stuff. Or when you see gold having its massive run, then what happens? Silver, which lagged, eventually started to break out. Gold led, silver followed. And I think Bitcoin and ETH, at least in TradFi terms, would probably be the same. So I think ETH ETF needs a strong Bitcoin ETF, and probably needs Bitcoin pushing above 75 for it to actually have a bigger move and break out. And I think most of that stuff is just months away and not weeks away or days away. And it's just a matter of time frame. So that would be my view. I don't see anything like immediately bullish. I see some lower time frame trading ideas, which I'll break down more on Trade of the Day. Last thing I'll talk here, because I'm not going to talk about it in Trade of the Day, is the election coins. So I mentioned this with Bowden, and so far it's pretty much playing out that Bowden is not bullish because it's too basic of a thesis, right? So I mentioned this on Monday or Tuesday or whenever it was, that as Bowden started to kind of bottom out And moving up, everyone's like, oh, this is it. This is good now. Let's get into voting because the debate's on Thursday and we're going to make easy money. And I said this a few times. You have to think about your counterparty. Who's going to buy it off you? If everybody's idea is the same, oh, I'm going to sell at the debate because there's going to be a big pump into the debate. Well, guess what? The people who bought here can then sell to the people here. Because this is pre-debate. And the people buying it here are saying, I'm buying it at 15 so I can sell it at 20 or 25 or 30. But what they're not realizing is they're buying it at 15 and the person selling it to them bought it at 8 or 10. So they've taken their 30 to 50% profit, or 50 to 100% profit, and they're chilling, sitting back as the latecomers get dumped on, and I see no pump here coming. Could there be like a random spike during the debate? Sure, but that's not of interest to me. The Trump coin looks better in terms of it's at least holding up and compressing here above the bands, and you might see a spike like that. So basically what I said yesterday, I think if there's a spike, it probably just gets sold back into. And there's a bunch of those other coins, but they're the two main ones, so yeah. That's it. That's what we're at today. GM. All coin requests later, 4 p.m. UTC. See you then. GM, GM, GM.